My name is Lola Leon Guerrero. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. I would like to recognize our Honorable Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, as well as Speaker Therese Terlahi. On behalf of myself and Matt Santos, the Deputy Director of BSP, along with our collaborators and partners, Department of Land Management, Joe Borja, Richard, also with the CHamoru Land Trust Commission, Alice Tyrone, and with the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, John Birch. This summit is a collaborative effort. This is the second Governor's Land Summit. Today's event was made possible with our CZM grant, the NA 22 NOS 4190193. The summit will be live streamed on the Guam Coastal Management Program's Facebook page. So with further ado, I would like to call the Governor to provide opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Lola, and thank you everyone for coming to this Land Summit. I'm really excited about this conference or this getting together. I see all my land agencies here, the Ancestral Land, the Department of Land Management, the CHamoru Land Trust, and all the other organizations and agencies that feed off the land. So I just want to say good morning, hafa day, and thank you for coming. Good morning, hafa day. Is that it? Can we just like be a little bit maybe? It's about land. I'm very pleased to speak to you all at the first Governor's Land Summit in like 20 years. This is truly a momentous occasion that calls upon us to address some of the critical challenges facing our island. Over the past 2 decades, our landscape has undergone profound changes. And as we look forward, we must chart a path that ensures a sustainable and thriving future for generations to come. Living on an island means we plan for a future where land is a finite resource, and expansion beyond the borders of our community is not an option. With limited space available, we must make judicious choices to maximize the potential of each parcel of land. Responsible residential and commercial planning, mixed-use developments, and thoughtful infrastructure projects, both public and private, can all contribute to optimizing land use while minimizing our environmental impact. We live in a time of dynamic change that makes every decision on land use even more critical than ever before. The changes happening to our island and the challenges that these changes represent for the future are at a scale and pace that are unprecedented in our history. Looming over local planning is the ongoing military buildup that presents unique challenges and opportunities. Military construction is happening at an accelerated pace and is expected to reach $2 billion by next year. As evidenced by the current EIS process for the Guam Defense System, this massive buildup will necessarily spawn scrutiny, concern, and debate. As we navigate this process, it is essential to ensure that development on our island is guided by principles of sustainability and responsible land use. Engaging in constructive dialogues with stakeholders, including the military, will allow us to address concerns while fostering mutual relationship, understanding, and cooperation. Through such an approach, I firmly believe we can arrive at a win-win situation for both the civilian community and the military. In addition to military construction, President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure bill ushered in a minimum of $250 million in infrastructure funding over a 5-year period. That baseline was increased further with the announcement just last month of $156 million in broadband infrastructure awarded to Guam. Quite rightfully, we live in a time of a once-in-a-generation investment in infrastructure that, if executed effectively, will have profound benefits for generations to come. Then there is the pressing challenge of climate change, which has a profound impact on small islands like ours. As the waves of climate change intensify, we are confronted with rising seas, coastal erosion, damage to coral reefs, rising temperatures that threaten our very water supplies, and the prospect of strengthening strong typhoons, challenges that demand our collective action and unwavering commitment. For small islands such as ours, our homes, businesses, and vital infrastructure stand vulnerable to the relentless advance of the seas, forcing us to confront the heart-wrenching possibility of losing our lands and livelihoods. As custodians of some of the world's significant and magnificent coral reefs, we witness firsthand the tragic consequences of climate change. Rising sea temperatures and ocean acidification are causing widespread coral bleaching, leaving these underwater wonders a pale shadow of their former glory. The loss of coral reefs means not only a decline in biodiversity, but could strike a devastating blow to our tourism industry and the countless livelihoods it supports. Additionally, rising temperatures threaten our freshwater supplies, a lifeline for our communities. As the climate warms, rainfall patterns shift, and droughts become more frequent, our water sources are under immense stress. The very essence of life is at stake as access to clean, safe water becomes uncertain. And of course, there are the challenges that result not just from momentous outside factors, but from the needs of a growing community. Top of that list is the need for more affordable housing. Housing is an integral aspect of our community's well-being. We must therefore strive to strike a balance between providing adequate housing for our residents and preserving open spaces and green areas. Affordable housing initiatives and smart growth strategies can coexist with conservation efforts, and together we can build a growing community that exists in harmony with our environment and properly manage resources. Yes, the challenges are many and they're diverse, and perhaps they may seem to some as overwhelming, if not daunting. I, for one, do not share that views because I believe in the resilience of our people. I believe in our ability to shape our island's future based on thoughtful deliberation, careful planning, decisive action, and most importantly, an honest dialogue based on truth and facts and not clouded by political posturing and propaganda. The path forward in effectively meeting the needs of our people, that path is forged in discussions and information provided in forums such as today's Land Summit. It is also found in other serious land planning initiatives, such as the Guam 2050 Sustainability Plan, being spearheaded, of course, by the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. Once completed, this will be the first comprehensive revision of our community's land use planning since the Bordalia administration in the mid-1990s, and it will be guided by the principles of sustainability. You are the ones who do the hard work, in managing our land resources, developing options for our community, and on occasion, you are the ones who make the hard decision. Thank you all for your dedicated service. My congratulations to Joe Borja and his team at the Department of Land Management, as well as Lola Leon Guerrero and her team at the Bureau of Statistics and Plans in making this summit a reality. My thanks especially go out to all of you for your participation in today's Land Summit and to your task of serving our community on the path towards a sustainable, resilient, and prosperous future. Si Zeus Maasi Todo ni bidan mimizu para itautauta, and I wish you all a successful summit.
Next, we'll call up our keynote speaker, Mr. Joe Borja, Director of Department of Land Management. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lola. Thank you very much, Governor. I think you were the keynote speaker, the direction that we were going. And although it is called the Governor's Land Summit, I hope that the product of today and the second day, as I'll explain later, also gets transmitted over to the legislature. And of course, Speaker Talahi is here, but I don't believe she's here as the speaker. She's probably here as the Committee on Lands Oversight on this issue. And so thank you, Governor, and thank you, Speaker, for your presence here. I know that these trying times have messed up all of our schedules and like that. But, you know, development, sustainability, and nowadays we have, we don't use the word development by itself, we use the word sustainability with it. Now, having said that, we kind of ask ourselves, where are we going? You know, what are we developing? What are we sustaining? And later on today, in the during the lunch hour, we will play back some snippets, I think they're called snippets, of the 2003 Governor's Land Summit. Now that's 20 years ago. Some of the people that are there, and I don't even know if there's anybody in the room that was at that summit in 2003. Yes, I see some people, but I won't mention that. It gives away their age only. But that was 2003, it was the Governor's Land Summit, and there was a lot happening and a lot changing back at that time. You had the CHamoru Land Trust, born in 1975 and baptized in 1993. And then you had another big player in town, which is the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. So those two land agencies control or have jurisdiction over a lot of land in terms of ownership. But then you also have EPA, and then you have Land Management Planning Division, and then you have DPW that have an effect on the development of these lands. Not only because they've been government agencies, but they are, for the most part, regulatory agencies. And land is only yours if you can. It's only you only own it if you can sell it, you can use it, you can mortgage it, and use it the way you want it. And some landowners really want to use land in another fashion that may not be acceptable to EPA, for example. When I was first asked to, do the keynote speech, I never really knew what a keynote speaker is. It's kind of like to set the tone of the conference, which, exactly what the governor did. We would think that land is a issue even at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning that we get excited about. So where are we going? How do we know where we are going if we don't know where we came from? And some of this snippets that I will play back 20 years ago, you'd say something like that would never happen again here. And it shows how far we came from 2003 and like that. Even in the climate of planning at that time, when we had the land summit, you see that there were other pressing issues for the government other than just land on there, you know. So hopefully that'll bring up some issues. Now the first summit in 2003 was actually planned for 5 days, because when they looked at the scope of what they wanted to cover back then, they 5 days, but then they cut it down to 3, then they cut it down to 2. And by the way, it was right across here. I think this is the Reef Hotel. It was up at the top of the reef. And there was a reason why they wanted it at the top of the reef. Because even then, as now, sometimes we have trouble keeping people after lunch. You know, after 2 o'clock, you know, and that's why the governor wanted to thank you guys for being here. Now, you might not be here in the afternoon. But it's really at that ending part that really goes through, because from that ending part, we had originally planned this, that the very next day, we would have our documents team work on it. So whatever information we gathered here, the very next day we would have a meeting, the admin people, to put together the report from this conference. But we decided to, we decided to break this summit up into 2 days because when Christian and I and Lola and Matt were looking at the agenda, we really couldn't fit everything in on that, on just that 1 day. And so we decided to invite some key people to show what we want to do on the second day. Now this first day is, BSP is going to show you the tools that we have. Because back in 2003, there was actually the lack of technology. The technology, GIS, plotting, planning, proper planning, wasn't really what it is today, of course not. But it's come such a long way that, for example, GPA's GIS section, I think they won a national award for GIS. GWA's database, I'm very impressed on it. You know, they can find that sewer line, you know, in their system, whereas before, a few years ago, they had to go back and talk to retired personnel from GWA to find where water lines are. So at least for the utilities, it's very, very much so. And you also heard the governor mention the water resource that we have. I see Commander Bearden here, and I'm sure he appreciates one of the maps that we have up here, because there's really 2 things that we can't survive with on Guam, no matter what you have. If you don't have water, and of course if you don't have clean air. So EPA comes into that. Now that is not a legal description, Commander Bearden rather, on it, but it may need the legislative action to designate. So how does it affect us when people come in to subdivide their lots and do whatever activity they want on their property? If it is within that blue shade of the property, you know, there are certain restrictions as to what you can do. Oh, and by the way, most of CHamoru Land Trust clients and constituents are in that blue area. And by the way, GWA can plot on that map. I know because they've done it before. They can plot on that map all their customers that have water bills. And they can also plot on that map all their customers that have a water and sewer bill. So if you extrapolate, deduct from whatever there, you can see how many people over the aquifer do not have sewer services. So that's a planning tool that planners back in 2003 don't have. So I'm very glad that Matt became deputy up there at BSP, decided to put all these layers together that were there already. And of course you have Edwin of their coastal zone management protecting that. And by the way, they're just steps down from the governor's office. It like shows kind of like what importance they have in this whole scheme of things. So it's a big picture. It's not just the land. it's, what's around you. And back in 2003, there was actually a serious lack of knowledge by government planners, especially in land management, as to what to do with the lands that land management had under their purview. Back in 2003, CHamoru Land Trust was 10 years old. Ancestral Lands was, I don't know how young they were, but so there was a lack of knowledge with the land management planners. We have this land, we have this parcel, what do we do with it? Legislature says, let's create some land for the landless subdivisions. GURA says, let's create a subdivision, that GURA has, and like that. So nowadays, land goes where it basically came from, or where the transfer document transferring it to the Government of Guam that Congress intended it to go to. Now, back in 1898, and John Birch and I have an argument sometimes about, is it Treaty of Paris or Treaty of Peace at Paris? Whatever it is, I'm very organized this morning. Whatever it is in 1898, U.S. got some land out here in the Pacific and other places around the island, around the world rather. Property, land, sovereignty over certain lands. 1900, the U.S. implemented the land tax. We never had that before. 1908 or 1903, there was a tax cut. They reduced it by half. And then in 1910, there was another tax cut. They refused to cut it again by half. 1925, they raised the taxes. In 1939, there was sort of a survey, 3,000 hectares, naval government, 3,000 hectares. Everybody know what a hectare is? We mostly deal with acre, quarter acres. A hectare is 2.5 acres. So that's about 10,000 acres, naval government. 17,000 hectares, federal government. 58,000 hectares in private property, including 60 estates that have 50 hectares or more, including 6 estates, 6 families, that have larger than 1,000 hectares. The largest land holdings were claimed by descendants of the 12 original mestizo families. This is in 1939. 1945, after the war, there was the Meritorious Claims and Land Transfer Board, which actually transferred Navy land to Gov Guam for sale to residents for rehabilitation and resettlement. So this land for the landless program is not a new thing, 1980s. That also occurred in 1945. In 1946, the government canceled public land leases for farming and grazing, the arrendos. I just had an arrendo question here earlier, and I don't even know that anybody really knows what arrendo is today, and like that. And this land will be used for residents displaced by military development. 1945. 1945. So this is what I mean about, let's see where we came from to decide where we're going. Because we had that. A lot of you may not know it, the village of Barrigada was actually created by the military. Nice square lots, straight streets, sewer, Barrigada. Dedido. You ever look at the aerial view of Dedido? Really planned out. Santa Rita, Talafofo, Mong Toto Maite, Toto especially, created by the military. And it's just one lot, lot 142 in Toto. Everybody that owns land in Toto is lot 142-67 or something like that, Everybody's got to say, that's your lot. But because it was created, and for who? For those people whose lands were taken for the airport. for NAS. You know, so they condemned land from 13 families in Barrigada area and created Barrigada Village and sold it back to the, like that. So this thing about planning, it's been going over, it was done by military planners. You know, they got the best beaches, the best overlooks, you know, and like that, because they're planners, they're good at that, you know. So we had that. But then come along later on, decades later, when the military, some military planners says, oh, we don't need that anymore. Let's go ahead and give it back. And here it is, no strings attached, you know, on the first bunch of returns. But then as the returns came slower, we're still processing 1977 returns that have not been documented. And of course, a lot has changed since 1977 to now in terms of the community. You know, now we need a bigger sewer treatment plant. Maybe we need one down in the south. You know, we need to upgrade in our utility system, and you know, we don't know. You know, sometimes I ask myself, who owns the utility system? Who owns GPA? Is it GPA board? Is it Gov Guam? Or are we still licensing it from the Navy? So these are things that we're finding out because they were established years ago. So there was a lack of knowledge back in 2003 about what to do with these specific lots, lands. And of course, when the land trust came up, they were given their inventory. And land management people will tell you it was a flawed inventory when it was given. And they did not have the planning tools needed to actually allocate those lands in what we call Public Law 2218. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but in 2218 it says government agencies, you reserve acres here, an acre here, 10 acres here. The law says give us your concept in 2 years, I think, I forget how many years. Give us your funding source to build what you want. If you don't do that, guess what? Reversionary clause. It goes back to the land trust. So the courts reserved land for a northern satellite. They did not initiate that process of getting the property. Now they're looking for land up north, you know. So, and we had planned that in that Public Law 2218. So the land trust now stands to earn, I don't know how many more acres, but guess what? Some of those acres are also unregistered lands. You know, you only find out about it when you need it. You know, so Forestry Legacy Act passed by the legislature. Determined forest, conservation areas, and like that. So now Department of Agriculture is saying we need land to establish our forestry service or forestry. And they're finding out that those properties are under the jurisdiction of the land trust, one, for the most part, and two, that they're unregistered property, like that. So Government of Guam has only filed about 130 land registration cases since the Organic Act. The government is also required to go to a land registration, and it becomes more important now when we file for grants. For example, federal EPA says to Guam EPA, hey, you find land, we'll build you EPA headquarters, state of the art. They gotta go out and find land. You know, so the land that they finally ended up getting, or through the work of the governor's office and through the work of the legislature, is the old solid waste transfer station in Derido, which was kind of gone against by the community. Derido didn't want EPA to build their headquarters there, number one, and they wanted the solid transfer station to remain there in that area. But the governor's office and the legislature saw a better use for that area, given that EPA wanted to build EPA headquarters for them, and all they had to do. But EPA says you gotta get that land in your name, in your title, because of a bad experience they had. Decades ago, I think it was Federal Highway built a mass transit building down in Naganya. Legislature turned around and gave that to the mayor's office. So since then, federal government says, no, we're going to spend some of our federal money, on EPA or for any particular agency. We want to make sure that you own the property, like that. So you have that, issue. Fire department needs a new Chigo fire station. Why? The property that they're on, it's not Government of Guam, it belongs to the federal government. They're licensing it on a yearly basis. That has to be addressed. As you can see in the lunchtime thing, GPD, problem they had 20 years ago, still same problem they have. Where's my headquarters? Where's my impound lot? Oh, by the way, DPW, you can't pick up any more abandoned cars if you don't have an impound lot, according to the AG. So why aren't you picking up those abandoned cars? Got no place to put them. You gotta find a place to put them, The AG's office says you can't impound cars if you don't have a piece of property to put it on. So, it has ripple effects on these things. Recently, Historic Preservation, Guam Historic Preservation Trust wanted to take over the Baptist, Inalahan Baptist Church. Who owns it? Nobody knew. It belongs to the library. So, gotta get something like that so Joe can get some federal funds to repair that thing or renovate it. But he's gotta straighten out the ownership title first. And like that. BLM needs a new building. But the property we were given to build a new building belongs to the land trust. Land management is not a builder. As a matter of fact, during my tenure at land management, we actually demolished 2 big structures. The old land management building in Anigua and GMH. So we're more or less, the D in Department of Land Management might be D for demolition. But the property belongs to the land trust. And guess what? John Mark Joseph found remains of the property when they were being built. So, that put a halt to that building of that property, for a land management building. And we spend $652,000 a year on rent, on that. And I believe we've been up there in our present locations, 9 years more. So, I don't know how many millions of dollars we spent out there, and now there's more people out there. So that's, usually the case. GRTA needs a maintenance facility. Even though I haven't heard any complaints about GRTA in a year. Like this, I was left by GRTA, till 9 o'clock that night. I don't hear any of those complaints. Maybe I'm not watching out for it, But at the last summit in 2003, GRTA, or Mass Transit at that time, did not come to the land summit. And they've been cursed ever since then of activity on that for not coming to the summit. GRTA is a real bad record for 2003. Only recently has it been going pretty good, and they need a new maintenance facility. And by the way, DPW is buying electric buses. So what do you need for electric buses? An electric gas station. Electric gas station is anyway, they need a recharging station. And you don't put the recharging station right where the buses start up. You want to put it maybe down in Pneumatic, so that when they run out of juice down there, there's power down there in Pneumatic, So he needs land for that, And maybe the Guam Energy Office can spearhead a grant for that, to build those. But even if you build it and you fund it, you still have to have land. By the way, I think GPA says we're welcome to use the ones that you have up there now. Where's that in-house charging station? So the GPS charging station is already up at Thani, where they're at used to be CHamoru Land Trust property. And the legislature passed a law that allowed them, the use. I believe it was probably only GPA that took advantage of Public Law 2280, and in all those reservations in there. And even that property really wasn't attractive. It was a bad slope on it, But some of the properties that were in Public Law 2218 were really not suitable for what they were reserved for. And why? Because there was no planning. There was no planning on it. When that Public Law 2218 was created, it was basically a title report from land management saying, yes, you can use this property for a hospital because we own it, not because it was suitable. So the property that was reserved for a hospital is over there in Santa Cruz Drive. I don't know if you guys know where Santa Cruz Drive is. It's over there in Chalampago. You enter it through the Palawan Evangelical School, and you exit over down there by the Cosules in Chalampago Order. If you ever go to that road, it's a long winding road that's 18 to 20 feet wide, and the lot that was reserved for a hospital is really creeks and valleys. Literally, you have creeks running on it, and you have valleys, and it's just no way that it's suitable. But if you had the tools back in 2003 to look at that and say, this is a 115-acre property, it's suitable for a hospital complex, let's look at it further. And then you go in there and you find out that the access roads are no good and the topography is no good, so let's move on. Let's look at another one. So we have those issues, and Department of Parks and Rec. How many of you guys have been up to Tiwat Cemetery? Bodies are being buried below the power lines. They're on the east fence. We need to expand that. We need to do land registration, and I like that. So, and when we talk today, and when we look at the snippets during lunchtime, just keep in mind that although we talk about the same title, same commission, there are different people on the commission now. So when we say, oh, the commission approved this, the commission approved that, the commission didn't do this, didn't do that, I'm not really referring to the people that are presently in that position, but rather what has gone on through the ages on that, So, and then, we come to land planning and list, and then all of a sudden, I'm gonna put in a missile system on the island. So that's also a land consideration, a big, heavy land consideration. And I just want to say at this point, as a reminder, because this is very important, that you agencies out there, you have a big deadline on August 10. Now, for me, that's an arbitrary deadline of August 10. Why August 10? That's a week before the final comments are due on August 18th. So you land agencies out there, you better be cranking up your planning division to make that report out to the governor's office, the governor's executive committee on that, to prepare for the response of the governor's office on that. So please, get that thing going. I know there'll be other matters coming up alongside of there. So that, unreserved land, missile, you can watch from the snippets in 2003 and 2003 and come up with a white paper. The second day of the conference, that's kind of like for me the big day on it, because this is a 2020-year event now. Second day we're looking at sometime in September rather, to give time to our partners to do that. Some of our agencies are still in semi-recovery mode in terms of preparing reports and interacting with other agencies. EPA is still busy, GPA is still busy, and like that. So we decided to have it in probably September, although it's kind of hard to do financial things in that end of the fiscal year, beginning of the fiscal year time, so it might be in October. But that's where we need the detailed input. from GFG, Gigo Fire Station, GPD, impound lot, DPW, maybe realignment of a road, maybe realign My Road. If you guys haven't been out My Road, it looks a lot better than it did about a year ago, and like that. So I'll go ahead. Edwin's giving me the finger to go here, the go finger. And, I got 5 minutes. That's what. Private. So it's the first summit here is intended to let Matt show you what tools you have, for properties that you may be interested in and to plan for it. And he's done a wonderful job. I'm pretty impressed, that what he has and the information that we have now to make decisions. I'd like to say that land management delegation just returned from a GIS conference down in San Diego, and we are working towards drone technology in our inspections and in our survey, for example. So we want to build capacity. The governor asked when she came in, build capacity with land management, stabilize it, and oversee the divorce between the three agencies: land trust, land management, and ancestral lands. And we're on our way, but we're planning, and we have really new things. If you see if you watch some of the snippets during lunchtime, planning today way off what it was in 2003. So this first is kind of like tools and some information from some of the other agencies. But on the second day, like I said, September or October, that's when we sit down with details. And we don't know yet, is it 1 day or 2 days, or are we going to have breakout meetings during the week with the specific groups, and then come and make a report to the entire group, as to what it came on. The lunchtime thing should be pretty neat. Like I said, my hair, I think, was black at that time, and I didn't have a beard, but you see some of the people that are in there and some of the issues they brought up, we're still bringing up, years ago. The Gita presentation, the lunchtime will be is very informative, and the interaction between Linda Alvin, your predecessor, John Marks Joseph, and Ed Borja, the building permit, building inspector, and director of the DPW. Classic. Good to watch. Okay, so second day, please make it to the second day. We haven't figured whether we're going to buy lunch for you on the second day of the thing, but we do intend, if you come, we do intend to keep you in. And, yeah, all right, okay. And Edwin just wanted me to remind you that there is absolutely no dancing allowed on the stage today. All right, thank you very much.
Next, we are going to have our contractor, Laker, who will provide a presentation on the Guam 2050 Sustainability Plan. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Joe, as always, you're a hard act to follow. Known Joe more years than I care to remember. Lots of stories go back a very long time. I'm not actually with Linker, but I'm on Linker's team. What's happened is the Bureau of Statistics and Plans has put together a multidisciplinary approach to do what really hasn't been done since 1978. And that is to create a comprehensive development plan. The basis of the development plan is a land use plan that's going to be developed in consultation and with the help of all of you. This process that we're involved in is not a process for enough consultants. This is a process that hopefully is going to bring the community together. And bringing it together means that we first need to come to consensus as to what the agencies, the government, planners, and everyone else in this community feels is going to be most important to identify what we really mean as a comprehensive development plan. But probably most important of all is to identify where we really think this plan is going to take us. Try and identify from the best input we can get from all of the people involved in planning and all of the people involved in public engagement, and particularly the public itself. What is the vision for Guam? What do we want this island to be like in 2050? Very difficult question to answer. No one real right answer. No one single vector to get there. But what our job is to come up with an approach and a plan that's going to bring all of these elements together so that at the end of the day, we have a means of explaining to the community what Guam is likely to be like in 2050. So I mentioned that we had a multidisciplinary group. Next slide. Oh, how do I do this? This one? This one? Side. Okay. Doesn't seem to work. There you go. Oops. Okay, thanks. Laker is a U.S. national firm. It's cross-country. It's involved in predominantly marine and coastal systems management and planning. We came to this project in large part because of work that we had done with BSP before to help update the Guam Coastal Zone Management Plan. And that area of expertise is important because Guam is really, being an island, has all of its area included in a what would be called a coastal zone area. So Linker is leading the team, followed by expertise that we have accessed at the University of California at Santa Barbara, led by Dr. Charles Lester. He was the former executive director of the California Coastal Commission, with many decades of experience directly in coastal-related planning, both land use, environmental, and socioeconomic. At the same time, another environmental group, Hamer, who has had quite a bit of experience in providing environmental services and conservation planning as part of the team. And then to assist us with land use and infrastructural coordination and development, Aaron here is from GHD, a world-renowned engineering firm that has offices here and across the United States and the world. And then assisting us locally is a smaller company, Pacific Coastal Research and Planning. It's a nonprofit, but it's dedicated to building environmental planning capacity. And finally, there's us. And my firm, Market Research and Development, has been operating out here since, oh my goodness, 1984. And what we've been doing is measuring how the public feels about product services, but also how they feel about policy and about the direction that the island is going. So our job in this process is to provide that glue that cements the technology and the technocratic advice with the attitudes and priorities of the local people. All right, so what are we actually doing? Law was passed by the legislature that said that what we needed to have on Guam was a complete and thorough update of the 1978 Comprehensive Development Plan. The purpose of this was not only to modernize that plan, but also incorporate all of the massive changes that have occurred environmentally and sociopolitically, and also clearly what is occurring in terms of the demands of growth and the shrinking resources that represent what a small island community has, and that's its land use. So utilizing the foundation of a land use plan, the object was to try and make sure that we could accommodate what the attitudes would need to be, or the expectations would be of a community that's entering into a new century, entering into a new period of time where their values are changed and where the community needs are constantly in flux. So to do that, what we have established is a means by which we think we can combine all that we currently have along with utilizing the specific goals that have been set by the United Nations for overall sustainability. So can we integrate what we know is going to be needed from a physical sense in terms of our land use planning, what we believe to be important from an economic and cultural sense? How do we make sure that it's going to be environmentally sound and at the same time pursue the goals that Guam has adopted as has been identified by the United Nations as representing suitable development initiatives? So the reason that this is important is because you can imagine how the people of Guam right now are feeling. They've come out of a period of tremendous flux. Their lives have been upended by the pandemic. Tremendous change has occurred across the community. And they have concerns as to where the island is going to go from here. We were recently buffeted by Typhoon Mawar, and we're struggling now to figure out how that's going to impact not only our private sector, but also our school system, how it's going to affect our daily lives on an ongoing basis. So what we did last year is we went out and we did comprehensive surveys of the community. We did focus groups, some 60 in total, of individual interviews and focus groups, and we also did an island-wide survey. And we identified some of the issues that are most important to them when they are asked about sustainability. What are the issues about sustainability that most affect them? And the first is that they need infrastructure. Clean water and clean power is without question the most important thing to the community at the moment, followed very closely by two predominant basic services, that being education, that being healthcare. Those two issues are paramount in terms of family perception about how the quality of life on Guam should be assessed. Next is the economy. Is our economy creating a future so our children can stay? What can be done to provide better jobs, higher incomes, a means by which we can develop careers and not simply hourly jobs? Then the environment is extremely important. People are really concerned about sea level rise. There's coastal erosion around the island, the sense that the island has gotten drier, although you would not necessarily think it this year. But nonetheless, people are concerned that climate change is going to dramatically affect the quality of life on the island. And finally, perhaps most important to certainly the CHamoru segment of our community, is the preservation of the culture. People are concerned that the loss of language has been equated in large part with the beginning of the loss of identity. And with the loss of identity, there's come all sorts of other social problems that families believe were caused because of the breakdown of the nuclear family and of the extended family on Guam, which stems all the way out to how they view their village and how the village itself is interacting with the community. So at the end of the day, the key to the preservation of the quality of life on the island has really to do with how we can create an environment physically, how we can create the services that are being provided in a way to preserve what we all know to be uniquely Guam, to preserve our spirit and preserve who we are. That makes us so attractive as a visitor destination and makes us one of the most pleasant places to live of any that we were able to identify among people that had recently moved to Guam in our survey work. So, if we go on to the next slide, we can see that purpose is really to start as the foundation of the plan with an infrastructure and land use assessment. Then to take a look at what that land use change and what that infrastructure development will mean in terms of helping to build a longer and more, a stronger and more robust economy, followed by how that is going to be done in such a way to preserve and conserve the natural environment and make Guam unique, and at the same time, all wrapped up in a strategy that's going to help preserve and promote our culture so that over the long term, we don't lose who we are and we preserve who our identity is. Finally, we have to address how this plan will be governed, how often it should be updated, who should be doing the updating, and what should be the most important priorities in terms of evaluating and reviewing the plan as a whole. So we go to the structure of the plan, and the first component is, of course, the public law that created it. So that's what the legislature was most responsible for, and has laid out a very distinct and very direct guideline as to what must be followed to actually put the plan together. And that's going to be followed largely by you. Our objective is not to redo any of the plans necessarily, but to identify how they can be coordinated. And once they've been looked at as a whole, as a matrix, we can identify where the gaps are, where the overlap is, where coordination may be duplicated, where there's a lack of coordination where there should be. So that we, in a sense, bring together all of the existing plans that exist under a single rubric towards a single vector, which then can be articulated and translated into a vision for where the island is actually going to be progressing. In order for that to be successful, it has to be based on community engagement. We're going to be talking to mayors. We're going to be talking to all of you. We're going to be holding charrettes throughout the island. We're going to be conducting surveys to determine how people feel. Unless this plan is perceived by the community as coming from the people themselves as much as it's coming from the government, it won't be adopted. It's got to be done in a fashion so that people believe that the ideas and concepts that are being developed are those that they not only understand, but they believe in. And then on the top, we have the UN sustainability principles. Underlying and through all of these are values that Guam already adheres to in large part. There's nothing unique or radical about what those goals are. But it brings us in line largely with what other communities in the region are also pursuing and considering. So it's a means by which we can coordinate not only what Guam is doing, but how it fits into the overall regional development of Oceania. And then finally, what we come up with in the end is what our sustainability plan is. It's a process that is ongoing. It's a living plan. It'll have a means by which it can be changed, but it's a reflection of all the best minds that we have in our community together to put together what they believe is most important, and it also reflects the values and the interests and the aspirations of our people. So, next slide. So if we go and take a look at what all these buckets of information are and how we want to approach it, we've organized it basically into 5 components. 4 surrounding a central concept of sustainability governance and how this all can be managed. There's cultural issues that need to be addressed. There's economic issues that need to be addressed. There's environmental issues that need to be addressed. But what's most important today, and what will be most important to the plan, is that it's based on an understanding about how our most precious asset, our land, is going to be managed and going to be developed going forward. Next slide. So the first step in this process is assessment. We're going to be coming out and talking to all of the agencies and identifying specifically what your roles are in this overall planning or development of a comprehensive development plan. How you feel it's going to be best, your agency can be best integrated. And what is the capacity, problems, and issues that you are facing so we can determine just what needs to be done to make sure that your agency is going to be able to participate in this process adequately. Then from there, we're going to analyze what we found out. We're going to identify, after talking with all of you, exactly what it is that we believe these gaps and issues are, where the conflicts and agreement exists, and then we're going to go in and do the next, which is identify from those the objectives of a vision going forward. In other words, what we learned from this investigation of all the agencies are going to be yielding priorities and the issues that are most important, not only to reach consensus for a way forward, but the obstacles necessary to overcome in order to get there. And at the end of the day, what that will do is portend a path. It'll identify a way forward. And that way forward then needs to be articulated into a vision for where we wish to go. Next. And then we need to go out and engage the community in this process. Did we get it right? Are our assumptions and our findings, what the people actually believe, is something that they can believe in and get behind? So we're going to be holding charrettes throughout the island, 3 major charrettes after going and having village meetings in all 13 villages, or 19 villages. And we're going to be able to identify from that a clear understanding, we believe, of how the people actually assess how this process is going to go forward. And then finally, we're going to do an island-wide survey to test those concepts and bring back to you, the agencies, to the legislature, to the governor, some empirical evidence to show the community's acceptance or those things that we feel must be changed, and we move directly into an implementation program. It's presented to the legislature. There's some public hearings. We're going to be working on developing legislation to help implement the program. But at the end of the day, all we have done in this process is to assist you. This whole process is really about undergirding the efforts of your agencies together in a consistent manner so that we can come up with a singular plan that all of you can believe is in the right direction. Okay, so if we look at the major elements, go to the next slide, please. There's, as I said, 5. One is land use and infrastructure. That's what this summit is about and why we're here to learn and listen. The next is going to be the economy, and what are we going to be doing with regard to making sure that we can help build better jobs, long-term jobs, help diversify the economy, help shore up the industries that we have today, how the impact of the military is going to be engaged in this process to make sure that we know what impact it's going to have on our economy. And then the natural environment, identifying where are the areas that need the most attention, what are the issues that need to have the most attention paid in order to make sure that we preserve our environment. And then finally, what are we going to be doing as a community to address the social and cultural issues that are resulting in changes, including the breakdown of villages, and what can we be doing in this conference to look at how land use itself can go about helping sustain our cultural values. And finally, we're going to be talking about how we're going to implement it. So we can move to the first one. In land use, we're going to be looking at information objectives that are going to be trying to deal with what are the land use conflicts that we see coming up in the future. What are the zoning laws that need to be changed, and how should they be changed to better meet the needs of the growing economy in the community? We're also going to be looking at the challenges that everyone is facing in providing infrastructure and public safety to residents and businesses. We're also going to be looking at investments that Guam needs to make in its infrastructure, make its infrastructure more resilient and more efficient. And then, what are the sustainability goals that require expansion of land use? What goals do we need to establish in the future? We hope that today that we can find out some of these answers, but we will have a chance to talk with each agency more in depth, and we'll be scheduling interviews with each of you after this summit to try and identify these questions in detail. Next slide. In the economy. We want to take a look at what is the nature of work on Guam going to be like in the future. How do we want to make sure that it's going to be fitting with what the economy regionally, internationally needs, and how do we make sure that Guam's part of that? But at the same time, how do we go about improving the quality of life overall through our private economy here on Guam? Raising wages, increasing the opportunity for career paths. And then what are the major land use challenges preventing the growth of the economy? What do we need to do to consider making sure that the economy is more broadly distributed throughout the island, such that there are crops and zones that are going to be identified specifically targeting economic growth? And what are we going to need to be doing to address the big elephant in the room, and that's the lack of transportation options that our community has, which is not only impinging the ability of people to get to and from work, but it's also clogging up our roadways, and as our population increases, military involvement increases, how do we deal with the transportation challenges? Just a few of the questions we're going to be asking. Go to the next slide, natural environment. What are the biggest threats that we're going to be facing in terms of our natural environment? What are the most important natural areas to conserve, manage? What efforts are being made to enhance public access so that the community as a whole can take advantage and understand and have more opportunity to engage with the environment? What are the new revised government policies and programs should be considered to improve conservation of Guam's natural resources? And then moving on, social and cultural, what are our values? What are Guam's values today? What do you think our values are going to be in the future? How can we be planning to make sure that we adhere to those values going forward? What are the major challenges we see in preserving our culture? What are the things that we as government agencies can do, we as private businesses can do, but most importantly, what is it that the community should be concentrating on to help preserve our native and our indigenous cultures, but also the culture that makes Guam unique? Also, what are the major issues facing mental and physical health? How do we deal with the issues associated with the angst that people have regarding healthcare? And what do you think should be done, and what do we think should be done to continue to promote the culture so that the world can know just what a wonderful place we have here? And finally, in a thriving economy, the community can focus on the environment and promote culture and promote wellness and promote growth. Our job is to help us all figure out how we can reach that balance. Okay. And then finally, in the implementation, we need to look at ways that we can have ongoing involvement. During the planning process, we'll have plenty of engagement. We're going to pay Facebook pages, social media pages, a website. We're going to do all sorts of things to allow the community to interact with us. We're going to be talking to them directly through a survey process. We'll have educational advertisements that are going to be going out surrounding what this whole process is going to be like. But once the planning process is done, how do we keep the plan alive? What are the things that are going to be necessary for people to continue to have their faith and involvement in the process itself? And then finally, how should it be managed and how is it going to be enforced? How do we make sure that once we've set this course, that there's going to be the discipline necessary to maintain it? And how frequently do we want this plan updated? Certainly it's got to be in a shorter period than we updated the last one. So we need to come together as a community to decide what that should be. And then the big thing that we need to consider now is what should be the proper role of the military in terms of its involvement in the development of this plan overall. What sort of seat at what table do they should have in order to make sure that their plans are integrated and we take full advantage of the opportunities they create. Next slide. So, as I was saying, BSP and the Linker team will be interviewing agencies throughout August. We're going to be setting up appointments for interviews that will last hopefully between an hour and 2 hours, and we hope that you can take the time after we have a chance to brief you as to what the interview is going to be like, for us to use this as a chance for us to get what you feel is going to be most important in this process. And then we want you to focus during these interviews on the things that are going to be that you can contribute to make sure that the plan is alive and is going to be resilient. So we'll be reaching out to you shortly to hold these meetings. And then afterwards, the next slide, we're going to bring it all together. Once we've talked to you individually, we're going to share with all of you what everyone else said. And the objective of the round tables are going to be to identify consensus, understanding the differences in objectives, coming together with a clear understanding of how, as an overall group, we feel this process should move forward. And it allows also a means by which all of the various groups involved in this can share information and provide what is necessary to properly inform the plan itself. Then from there we go to community engagement. Next slide. And involves the meetings with the mayors in all the villages, as I've mentioned, the stakeholders. Then we're going to hold a charrette in the south, the central, and in the north. And then we're going to hold an island-wide survey when it's all done. And then out of this whole process, we're going to have the opportunity to say that the community has had its fair say as to what the plan overall should look like. It'll also be part of an ongoing dialogue that we're going to have with folks over social media and through the media. And finally, on step 4, we have the utilization. We will be working with all of the information that's been developed to put together the plan itself. And this process also, with the underpinning of the UN objectives, will be used to prepare a document that will then be presented to the legislature, and then legislation will be developed to help implement it. And that's part of step 5, last slide. This is where we're going to be holding public hearings, where the details of the plan will be discussed, and the community will have a chance to comment on the proposed legislation to actually implement the program. And that's it, last slide. So, questions we've been asked to direct to Matt and to Lola, but I'm here today if you have any questions for a brief period to answer. You've got one. Yes, Governor.
So, Jay, thank you so much for such a very comprehensive presentation, and I appreciate the work of Linker. And I'm very excited that the UN Sustainable Goals are intertwined into the 2050 plan. But I also don't know if you are aware that there is the G3 group that we've been working with the University of Guam, the Guam Green Growth Group, and they have done a lot of work.
They have done a lot of work in the sustainability goals that the UN has put forward. It's a very comprehensive task force. We engaged and we committed to the UN sustainable goals. We had a task force of a lot of representatives from throughout the community. We're like over 100 people that came at the beginning, and we've broken down into subgroups and categories of addressing all the 17 sustainable goals. So I'm wondering if you're working with that group through the University of Guam with Austin Shelton.
Yes, can you bring up the last, there's one more slide.
And before I quit my comments, I want to make sure that you also focus on aquaculture and not just agriculture, because we're doing a lot of momentum and work into aquaculture also. And then Gita also has an economic diversification task force. I'm sure you probably met with them. And we're bringing in other kinds of industries into our island, and one of them is additive manufacturing. And that's really a goal. That's going to happen. So I'm sure your group has connected with all these people here.
Yeah, let me just take them backwards to the front of the first question. Yeah, we've been in touch with Gita, and we're really excited about their last meeting that they had in Maryland about diversification and all the new investors that are looking to come, and then the newly appointed diversification committee. We will be directly meeting with them and talking about their plans. So we're very much involved with that. Yes, we are including aquaculture as part of our the overall food sustainability component of the plan. So yeah, that is a key component. But in terms of your first question, we've been working closely with Shelton from the very beginning. When we were first engaged in doing research, he was very helpful and participated in that to give their point of view. And so our perception, and we believe they share this, is that there are really two roles that the two groups play that are completely synergistic and complementary. What we're doing is the actual comprehensive planning activity, providing a means by which the technical aspects of these plans needs to be put together. Whereas Shelton's group, and what makes them so valuable, is that they're all about community action, is helping to translate that plan to folks, but at the same time bringing in the issues that are going to be important from the community from their perspective because of the extensive work that they've done. Now, they're going to play a very key role in what we're doing. But we have our lanes, and we work very well together from the very beginning, so thank you very much for that question. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Can I get a raise of hands of how many GIS users are in the room? Can I get a show of hands of how many people don't know what GIS is? So at least I know my audience. So it's kind of good that we have these pretty maps up here because, you know, this is something that most the line agencies are pretty used to using, but we kind of, you know, don't take advantage of, you know, all the data that's behind it. So, you know, we're talking about government properties, we're able to highlight who's the owner or who has jurisdiction over those properties, but there's a ton of metadata behind that, from the type of land use it has, whether it's CLTCs and land lists, is it for commercial use, the legal documents, and then also the source. So in my presentation, I'm going to go over, just provide a brief overview of GIS in government administration and public services, and this is exclusive to the line agencies. The current inventory of geospatial data and statistics that we have in our enterprise cloud as layers that are available for sharing and for the application within web maps and web maps. And then the application of GIS in Guam to provide some examples. And then what are the next steps that we need to take to basically fully realize the value of GIS for both our public services and for enhancing our government operations and making them more efficient. So currently, I have it broken out into 4 major functions of using geospatial data in government, and their planning, administration, emergency management response, conservation, and restoration. So on the planning side, I think that's the side that uses the most amount of information because it needs to make considerations about what are other people doing, what type of land it is, what's the purpose, and then also what's existing. So existing zoning to conservation areas to whether it's a surface, or it's a groundwater protection zone where there's wells. So we have to build around a lot of our man-made and natural constraints as well. Right now, what's really pushed us to kind of, at least for the line agencies, because EOG and GPA and GWA are kind of where they should be in terms of GIS, is that we're moving into automating permitting for the government of Guam. We also have the recent launch of the next-gen 911 system. That's kind of, forced us to be a little bit more organized in compiling and updating our separate layers. So that includes parcels, addresses, and road settlements. So, this is the, my current list is not complete, but this is the overview of what is the common application of it. So I'm going to go into the different layers that are available right now. So parcels, for example. So again, contrasting against a printed map, there's a lot of information behind that, whether it's zoning or ownership. Zone variances and conditional uses are something that we should add because you can be a R2, but you might have a commercial related zone variance or the variance of zone. The type of owner, and then the conditions around that. For location and built infrastructure, obviously for the utilities agencies, they have a pretty comprehensive and complete and up-to-date set of layers, and then the rest of them are being updated as needed. You have your conservation and historic preservation related layers. The one that we're kind of really behind on is the archaeological sites. So, right now we're all working, the line agencies are at least working off of individual files that are on their desktop using a desktop application. And part of my presentation is to kind of compel everybody to move away from that and start sharing and managing things in the cloud. And then we have our land and water characteristics and systems. So this is a combination of information, whether it's for GWA, WERI, or previously federally funded studies or surveys. So it's pretty exhaustive on this end. So a lot of this information doesn't change outside of the modeling. So this is the basic workflow that we're trying to move towards is, we collaborate, I guess, within GIS. Right now on the author and edit, we're really kind of working in vacuums when it comes to GIS. We were recently on a NEPA call with our historic preservation archaeologist. He was talking about, he needs access to this GIS computer to look at these areas. And I think it's beneficial that we have shared information that we can collaborate on so we don't have to get to these things so late in the game. So everybody's aware, informed, and educated about what the different development constraints are and how they need to address them up front until, having to address them later. And those created inefficiencies in our permitting and also in our land use plan. And the other thing that we're not, taking advantage of is that, we have an enterprise license agreement with ESRI, and we don't really, leverage them to the extent that we should. So part of my presentation is going to be, what's the outcome in certain use cases of, how we can apply them within government and enhance our public services. So some of the current uses is in environmental permitting. So as you see up top, you'll see active wells, groundwater protection zones, and having information like this as a decision tool helps you identify what's prohibited, right? So whether it's having a septic system or not. And I was just talking to Captain Bearden that what would be beneficial is publishing this information, which we have public now, and adding it to their FAQs. So that's a real simple use case of how we can get to the front of it and make sure that the public is informed of making development decisions or proposing a development so they know what their development constraints are or what they have to mitigate or what they have to address in their design to work around some of the different factors that, that dictate what they need to do in the development. Next steps is we're actively in procurement for licensing and permitting. So from the business license application and verifying whether it's a proper land use or zoning, identifying the owner, Department of Public Works. This will be used for clearing, grading, building, and then for the various land use applications, sanitary permits, and GFDs, activities, materials, and use. This slide shows, land use and an existing zoning. So we have the policy side of land use with the North and Central Land Use Plan that is, really tailored around the fact that, these areas are over the aquifer, and a lot of the policies within that plan are driven by it. So when using the combination of land use plan maps plus the documents that are tied to them, this already creates some efficiencies in informing the public of what they can and can't do when going into the land use application process. From looking at existing development, existing zoning, we're able to do this. So the same layer that they're using to identify public lands in the map that we see right here printed out, the same information is also available within that same layer. It's just a matter of applying different metadata categories that are associated with it. This is the level of detail that we have at a utility level, and we're speaking with GPA, that we're able to leverage their GIS information just once it's not customer. So federal and gov Guam. These types of maps are important to understand, where we have property and then our planning forward, how we intend to use it. On the local side, we have ownership, land use, document number, whether it's legislative land use or whether it's part of a land use map. On the federal side, we have federal easements, we have returned lands, and then we have the individual parcels with their intended use. So when we collaborate, we look at how they manage land and how we do ours. We could definitely look at whether it's compatible between our different properties. And most of these slides I can go into light demonstration on just to kind of demonstrate the amount of detail that we have for this information. For land use permitting and planning and management, we have existing web apps that I created to where, basically all those layers that I just showed within those tables are available. It's a matter of making them visible. You can design them. You can use them for different, permitting or land use scenarios. So for example, I could put a school as a point of interest, and then use that to determine whether a cannabis establishment is within the right distance of that place. So we have like measuring tools plus the appropriate layers to be able to create those scenarios, so we can be more efficient about how we do our our land use clearances, or cannabis clearances, or when it comes to economic development, and also the way that we address serving underserved or marginalized communities, we have socioeconomic data that's segmented by a village, census designated place, which is the neighborhoods, and then down to a census tract. So it's pretty granular, so we can know whether it's a poorer area where people lack education, utilities, and those are in the selected housing area. So this is available in our dashboard that's on our website, but they also exist in layers in our SU Enterprise Cloud. So this is an example of how we, perform a suitability analysis. So we can combine different layers to kind of figure out, where there's hazards, where there's conservation, where there's restoration activities. We know whether there's like coral, to kind of determine whether proposed sites for submerged cable landings are appropriate, and whether they'll have an effect. And this is key both when we're providing our input on it, because a lot of the times these are nationwide permits, and it's important that we have a lot of the information we need to either provide concurrence at PSP or from a public input standpoint. So hazard and climate change vulnerability mapping. And these are two different scenarios of where we combine existing layers to kind of create different functions. From one, how we prioritize shoreline protection projects. That's how we determined that the revetment that's going to be being built for East Tigonian was a priority, because we were able to address where we had the shoreline protection was critical, and and then have that centered around infrastructure and then also population growth. On the right, we have an example used for looking at climate change vulnerability of both infrastructure and population. And this is something that we use to calculate social vulnerability, because the CDC doesn't provide it to us. So this is done by Dr. King and our funding. It's come into use, especially on the federal funding side, in the way that we plan. We have existing web tools, based off of products that, from our contractual engagement, say with the Army Corps when we did our Guam shoreline areas. So we made a digital version of it to where it's an interactive web map. More of these can be created if we can create a case for it, both for your agency or for the benefit of the public. When we're talking about the sustainability plan and kind of tracking growth over time, we have tools to where we can look at geospatial data in a time series to see the rate of development, the loss of habitat, the increase of habitat impacts of restoration efforts. We can get data like this. NOAA is actually actively doing the LiDAR and imagery for this right now, so we have recent data to compare against 2015. So right now, before it was in 5-year increments, but due to the pandemic, it kind of delayed that. So we're also capable of collaborating in GIS. So this is, if you look at this, this is collaboration with like my agency, GFE, FEMA, and then the utilities agency. So, you know, we're able to, you know, apply our government layers, the federal ones, and then also crowdsource data that's, you know, useful to emergency response. You know, this helps us kind of like, you know, in an emergency also, you know, zoom into where we have like marginalized populations that had significant damage. And that's where we can, you know, apply things like geospatial damage assessments. So something that's recent is the, you know, access to Maxar data, and, you know, being able to export high resolution GeoTIFFs or you know, imagery vector layers to kind of assess the damage. And these can be used in a layered comparison, say within a web map, where you can create a slider to kind of look at the before and after. We're also leveraging this type of use for monitoring debris sites, you know, used for the cleanup of, you know, post-Typhoon Guam. So the next steps, at least for us, really, is to create a full version catalog of geospatial data for Guam. This will involve, and then following that, survey stakeholders and federal partners, and subject matter experts on available data and GIS layers that are not included in my catalog. You know, add anything that's, you know, useful or should be added to our catalog, and then develop use case scenarios for GIS and enhancing services to the public and those institutions. So this can be done really quick, you know, quickly, even over a conversation. Like the example I used with Captain Bearden, of where we can integrate both web maps with their FAQs so they can easily access information so they're informed when going through the permitting process. Some of the immediate priorities for us, and I'm sure the utility agencies understand the importance of this, is having a update the current parcel road address layer that they can rely on. So one of our challenges with really integrating is making sure that, you know, what we have published is current and accurate, and there's not a lot of interaction that is required. Just so you know, like on the DPW side, we just moved from marking up Mylar maps. I mean, this is like recent within the last 2 months. But due to our need to provide a complete database for our next gen 911 system, we've been forced to move over to digital. So at the permit center now, they're basically updating web map using the web map editing features to update road lines between intersections, you know, the to and from, and then also the geolocators for assigning addresses. So the other one is, you know, develop governance policies for the administration of GIS data, mapping applications, and this is really more focused on the line agencies because, you know, you know, they have one group of people doing these things, and they have better controls over it because they've been doing it for so long. And then document the processes for updating core GIS layers. And then finally is update the guidebook. So currently we have the guidebook to development requirements in digital version that links to both, you know, that includes forms, that, you know, hyperlinks to existing laws and regulations to, you know, provide that level of detail when kind of instructing the public of how to navigate the permitting process, both on the local and federal side. Some of the future opportunities is, you know, we're talking about capacity building. We have a significant amount of BIL and IRA funding for capacity building that we're focusing on GIS. The federal GSA actually approached us because they're proposing a project that involves adding Guam to the National Address Database. And, you know, different from before, you know, where you just kind of apply for grants to improve your capacity. We're able to engage some of the federal agencies to provide direct technical assistance or customize GIS products, you know, that align with our objectives. So this is ultimately the outcome of what we're looking for on a governance level is, you know, in our inventory. So we're going to have the layers, the authors and editors. You know, we're going to fully version document the source in the last update. You know, document the frequency of updates and then the process. And this is really how easy it is for us to update things like addresses and roads. It's really down to drawing lines and entering data. So we can, with the use of our enterprise license agreement, we can edit tables directly or click on point or line segments to, update the metadata we're at. So, this is like kind of like a combination of things that we're asked of Army Corps. They want to give like parcels, addresses, hazards, development constraints. Some of the things are things in the state water well. It's going to, name what the water well is, what it's used for, whether it's active or not. It's also document this is part of the debris management. So, a lot of these layers are then applied to things that are like solutions within Esri. There's solutions catalog that are basically turnkey business applications, and one of them, which is emergency debris management, which is EPA compliant out of the box, and also follows any of FEMA's processes in terms of being auditable for reimbursement. So this is where we can edit, and these are just some examples of it. Just click on something, you can edit it. And it's that easy. When we're updating or editing information that gets stored in the database. So rather than us kind of like trying to consolidate updates and edits from all these different sources, we can now do it through one central source. And for assigned agencies where it's multi-agency review or there's different editors and authors, we can apply workflow to this to make sure that we have quality control over our updates and additions to our GIS database. So it's both accurate for us and also for the public. And again, here's so anything that has a geospatial relationship, especially if you implement PIDs, right, which is going to be a unique identifier that we use for private lots. So you can put anything that applies to a specific area, right? So if I put a PID against a zone change or improvement, I could merge all that information just as long as we have some sort of unique identifier to be able to map it with. So this is an example of different sources to where that leads to DLM. Guam inventory from an Excel spreadsheet that was merged into a geospatial file, and that's how we're able to publish it. So there's efficient and quick ways that we can add the information that we need with little programming, little to no programming. This is there's different ways in which we can display some of the natural and man-made layers supplied by GWA or from WERI to understand flooding better, or to for the public to understand what they need to do to kind of deal with the surface temperature. So here, this is onto the Guam Better. Some of the things that are important for us to for land management and for administration is to have the appropriate history of what where the land came from, why it was granted, what was the legal authority. So we have a lot of that information here. Whether it's the land disposal type, who's the grantor, when it was transferred, who the grantee was. So we have that document history, and then it transfers over to being able to use that data and also our land records to what was the legal document of the form that the land was transferred or created. And this is similar to what they have on this map, where it's mapping government inventory. So a lot of the data behind the orange areas, which are Guam, we have ownership by agency, the type of property it is, whether it's a, for development, whether it's an easement. And we have that on the federal side as well, that we didn't really have mapped previously, and that includes a lot of the federal easements that exist in places where you didn't think it was federal property. So as you see, you have easements like along Green Drive that are federal, and then it has all the, the appropriate information for you guys to understand. And here's the land management super map that I was showing earlier. So, from an internal standpoint, we can use these things to kind of, be built or customized based off of whatever the application is. There's tree management, whether it's different planning scenarios to kind of look at what, compatibility, to even doing a suitability analysis, right, for proposed projects. They can be built basically by just adding and subtracting the different areas of node within our inventory. You can also print maps or export them for the use in plans, for like a hazard mitigation plan, land use plan, and so forth. And obviously, we can use plans also to how we kind of communicate with the public. So, say for the Guam Forest System Plan, these are the prospective sites, which are all government properties. And we can apply land use terms. What are the contents within the area that we're trying to preserve, and so forth. So that's the extent of my presentation. So hopefully, you guys are aware of what we're capable of, what we have, and you can think of ways that we can use this information and the technology to both improve your agency's operations, but also increase the public benefit in their ability to be informed. Because I work a lot on the permitting regulatory side, and we see that a lot of issues can be addressed on the upfront if they have all this information. I'm not going to pay some engineer to design my house with a septic system over a place that shouldn't have it or can't. So, I think that there's immediate use to this, even absent of an automated permit system. So, any questions?
Matt, I have two questions. And some of the people may not know here, but when people apply for a business license, sometimes they use their street address. And we have a hard time clearing that for zoning because zoning is a lot identified. It's not 148 Santa Monica is a residential. It'll be lot 6, track 112 residential. So that really helps out in helping us. And then Matt, maybe for that next step slide that you had there for the government agencies.
Sure.
Maybe you can pass that out to the government agencies, hard copy, as to what the next steps are for the GIS or wildlife agencies.
Yeah. So the next step for me is so once we put up the video on our website and then the presentation materials, I'll also include surveys, links to the catalog that I have currently compiled, so that they have actual way to find this information. There's supplementary information regarding the use, the origin of the layers, so they can comment on it. So they're going to have this information available to them, so I can get feedback and make sure this is updated, so we can start using the term internally and ultimately publish for public consumption.
And thank you for that search. Right? The third item I had here is you can only access that system if you have a GIS license, correct?
No, so we have a lot of stuff that's public, right? So the layers we don't have public are going to be some of GPA's infrastructure stuff. Information like we use, like for our business disaster damage assessment, we got GPA service addresses, and that's how we knew which commercial properties were there to make sure that we hit every spot. We also use it for our high survey for identifying risk, but we don't release everything. But what's public is based off the permissions that are associated with the layer. So you can have a map and have partial of it in public, and then some of it not. So it's just a matter of how we manage the access to it, and the information is associated with it. So, because of the Typhoon Marwar and not being able to add all these federal partners that needed this information, we made a lot of this stuff public. That included the parcel data, a lot of our protected area information, some of our environmental. So it was published. I mean, it was the best that we had. And, you know, been rapidly trying to update the stuff to be current, like, you know, adding wells or making sure that we have a complete address database, because that's, you know, one of the priorities. So in there, I could part of this. My slide presentation was. This is what's going to be on there. So we're going to be documenting what's public and what's private, and what should be, you know, so you can comment on what should be private, what should be public. And you know, you know, for me personally, I don't have an issue with things being public. My own, I'm only reluctant to make things public because I want to make sure they're complete and accurate and verify that before we release it. Because, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's the best and it's all we have. But you know, there's also liability with that. So we need to make sure that we document or at least publish the terms of the use for these layers to make sure that, you know, that liability doesn't come back on us, even though we're doing our best to make sure they're accurate.
I'm just afraid of a bad actor coming to a GWA and asking for a location of all their water wells. You know, and going towards the east.
Yeah.
But insofar as the GIS license, I don't know how many GIS licenses are out in the government. I think 147 or something like that. And we're all supposed to be paying our fair share of the license, which is about $100,000, supposed to go up to $300,000.
No, it's 130 a year over a 3-year period. That's the.
So we have one agency that uses a lot of the licenses but hasn't paid their share. So I won't mention any names, but just trying to keep that fair.
Actually, our enterprise license agreement expired, and they're offering to pay 2 of the 3. That's what I hear. Any more questions?
Oh, there you go.
Hi, John Monk, Joseph Pierce, state archaeologist. I just wanted to say what he has, what I guess is known publicly for our GIS are the National Registered sites.
Yes.
Not the Guam Registered sites, and some of the ones that are National Registered are redacted. They're redacted by the National Register. We don't want people to know where they are, certain things, because artifacts go missing. Everybody likes to collect the sling stones. They want to, you know, a Lusong in their yard or whatever that happens. We've had one laddie said we know of bulldozed this year, so you know, people like to clear their land. But right now, I just put yesterday. I put one on from 1992. So I put a site on their GIS from 1992. We're still way behind time. 40 years behind, but we're trying to catch up, trying to get a GIS person in there to do that. When you do have a project, then you can write us. We will go and then look at the sites within a quarter-mile radius and send them to you as per the project. So we, you know, that way we can help out and work that way. Right now, what happened was we had a lot of sites that were put in their database. They did not know what data they were working on. Right now we're using WGS 84 for everything. We have to redo our attributes table. I've got 5 different databases that I work off of just to try to get things corrected. And then everything there we have to geo-reference a map to then therefore make sure it is in its proper place. So.
Yeah, so I know what you're talking about. So, you know, like say for example, like toolboxes in Tumon, for example, right? You look on a map, they're in the water.
Right.
So we have internally we have the right location, but you know, publicly we adhere to the terms that the National Park Service has for not disclosing the actual location.
Well, yeah, and what we're trying to do is we don't want bad information going out, and that's kind of what happened.
So it's in the notes. So if like you were to click over the approximate location of that pillbox, it'll say that this is the general area, because that's published, right? Because
Right.
that's on the National Park Service layer, so we're only sharing what's available publicly.
Right.
And then internally, we make sure that we have, especially when we're doing debris cleanup, we want to make sure that we know where they are, so we're not, disturbing them.
Right, FEMA's coming to us now, so we're trying to work with them to get some of their sites back on, Like I said, I just put one in from 1992 that wasn't on their GIS list. I'm a little bit behind that, but I'm only one person, so I'm trying to work with that to get that straightened out. And then, like I said, when you have it, we will go over all the information we have. We just got our library set up, so it's all per village. So when somebody comes in, they go straight to the village, look up all the information there, and see what we have.
Yeah, so basically what you're providing me is the response that we're looking for, right? That we have this inventory, and then there's a rationale associated with why we should make it public or keep it private, and then we kind of, weigh the cost benefit. Right, so.
Once we get it set up and we have everything that we know is correct, then we can have it to the public where they can see it to a certain point, but then when they zoom in, it'll fade out.
Oh, yeah.
So that way, it's like, okay, look, we can't tell you exactly where it is, but, you know that this area has different historic properties. And actually, what we're finding out now in some of the maps that you showed, we're finding tons of historic properties in the middle of the island, all up on the northern plateau, and even in the southern part of the island that we didn't know we had before.
Yeah, so you'll kind of apply that, right, for geospatial damage assessments to our published, image layers were cut off at a certain visibility level. So, we implement those types of practices now. So, if that's a condition, that's something that we know that we can easily implement because we just put the parameters in which they're visible. So,
Right.
So thanks for that example because that's a great example of what we're looking for.
Yeah, so I think we have maybe it's like 140 or 160 on the National Register that, they can see or whatever. Some of those, like I said, are redacted. But we have over 3,000 sites in their database. So it's, what you see on the National Register is not reflected on actually what we have in their database. All right?
Thanks, everybody.
Next on our agenda, we have development and infrastructure. We would have the Director of Department of Public Works, Vince Ariola, present, as well as the GIS Supervisor for Guam Power Authority, Mr. Antonio Gumatata, and then the Engineering, Assistant General Manager for Engineering for Guam Water Works, Ms. Jeanette Lavata. So we can have Ms. Vince come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lola. Thanks, Joe, Lola, staff for inviting me. Real pleased to be here. Before I begin, can I just get a show of hands? The smart people in the room, like myself, who woke up this morning and saw in their schedule Dusit, and so they all went to the Dusit over there. A lot of smart ones here. Yeah, that's okay. We react real quick. But I'm real pleased to be here at this summit. Hopefully this takes us to a better place in this island because we've got a lot to do, as you've seen from the previous presentation. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about public works, basically what we do in general, but I'm really going to focus on our roads and our streets throughout the island. Because if there's anything that's related to development and infrastructure, it's going to be our roads, our highways, our village streets. So let's go ahead and begin. So here at Public Works, this is our main compound. In Upper Tumon, We also house GRTA, a portion of revenue and tax for vehicle registration. Guam Energy office is in the same compound, and also the contractors license board. Next slide. One of the divisions we have within Public Works is our building construction and facilities maintenance. And I threw these folks in because they do maintenance for a lot of the government agencies that you see up here. And these aren't all of them, these are just some of them. And we do major maintenance, if you will. I know most, if not all, these agencies have their own housekeeping, maintenance folks, but if there's a major plumbing issue, there's some construction that needs to get done, we'll go out there and we'll take care of that. Next slide, please. We also run the bus system for the entire island, for the public school system and private school system. We have over 100 buses, and we've got all the 8 satellite stations throughout the island. And I think was mentioned earlier, we just received a grant to purchase a number of electric buses as well as charging stations. So that's going to be a huge project for us, and we look forward to saving some money on diesel for sure. Next slide. Okay, now to get into some of the roads. We've got 166 miles of primary roads. These are the routed roads. A little over 800 miles of secondary roads. These are the village streets. Let me just stop right there. If you look at the 166 miles of primary roads, and if you do the math, based on maybe 100-foot wide easement, that comes up to about 250 acres of primary routed roadways. The 860 miles of secondary roads, streets, and public easements, I think I averaged that at about maybe a 40-foot wide easement. I think the numbers came up to close to about 500 acres, and I was talking to Joe Borja earlier. That equates to what do we say, maybe Agana Heights? A village the size of Agana Heights. But again, we're responsible for all those roadways, the maintenance, the potholes, the shoulders, the grass clearing, so on and so forth. There are also 60+ bridges and culverts throughout the island. I never knew that until I saw the information, but we do have 60+ bridges and culverts. We have 88+ ponding basins and growing. We don't take care of all of these. Some of these are handled by private sector. Some of these are handled by other government agencies if it's on their property. We also run the coral pit in Derrida. That's right off Waisensong, and that assists us with all our roadway needs. And besides that, on our federal mandates, we're also responsible again for ponding basins, outfalls, rivers, and our latest one is stormwater drainage. Before I switch to the next one, I wanted to stop there and just talk a little bit about easements and rights-of-way. The plan that comes out of here has to really take into account our public easements, public rights-of-way, and even private property. I never imagined in my life that we would have so many issues of public property or buildings on private buildings on public property, public buildings on private property, and things of that nature. It's incredible. Joe, we probably deal with this once a week, right? It's incredible the stuff that's out there that we have to fix. And these happened many years ago. Many years ago. I think I think that was brought up also. We are in the middle of paving Mai Road. There's little slivers, little portions of Mai Road that are owned by a number of private properties, but we've gone ahead and paved that in the interest of public safety and public welfare. The other thing that we're doing on the federal side is we're putting together an asset management plan, and that will give us an idea of everything that we own within Public Works. So that's going to be all the roadways, all the easements. That'll go down to every stop sign, every yield sign, every curb, every gutter, every storm drain, every outfall, all the rivers and things of that nature. So that's going to be a huge boost to putting this 2050 sustainability plan together. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about some of our federal highway funded projects. And these typically are ongoing every fiscal year. So we've got the Route 10 safety improvement projects. That's going to go from the tri-intersection all the way up to the intersection of Route 10 and Route 4. We're going to do some traffic signal upgrades. We're going to do some cutouts throughout Route 10. We don't have the funding for a complete repaving of Route 10. So we're going to do on Route 10 what we did on Route 8, where we did where there was degradation of the road. We're going to do some cutouts there and then strengthen it and then repave it. And then of course we'll do the full striping. And then on regular maintenance, we do our pavement striping and marking. We just finished Route 4. And we just finished Route 8, so we're about to start Route 1, and that'll take us from the Agania Loop all the way to Naval Station. We've got the bridge preventive maintenance that we do, the usual traffic signal upgrades. Well, after Typhoon Marwar, the traffic signal upgrades have been upgraded to traffic signal replacements. We're going to replace probably 80% of our traffic signal heads, lights, and a number of the cabinets that got destroyed during Typhoon Marwar. Then we also have the Agania Memorial, and I believe we forgot to add that on. There's a memorial by the Ely Bridge, and that was for I think some of the ancient artifacts that were found in that area. Next slide, please. These are some of the current road projects that we have ongoing. The first two have just been completed. I'm sure you can tell Route 1, we did the resurfacing. That took about a year on Marine Drive. Route 28, that's Waisengso up in Derido. We just completed that. And thankfully that was a really degraded road, and we're real happy about the final results. We are in the middle of constructing and widening Route 5. That's down in Sumay, Santa Rita area, and that's from the mobile gas station all the way to the intersection of Route 5 and Route 11. On Route 14B, that's the portion that's closed, that's going down from the Seventh-day Adventist Clinic down to the intersection at the Hilton Hotel. We've had to close that. We've got some major degrading issues on the cliff line there. As a matter of fact, we had to extend the contract time about 3 months because the base there basically has collapsed. So we'll get to that. We'll get that all fixed. And then when we're done, we hope to finish up the project on phase 2, taking it all the way to Marine Drive. We've also started the Route 14 resurfacing. You'll see what they're doing is they're replacing a lot of the soft areas, the degraded areas within the roadway, strengthening that, and then they'll do a full repavement from the post office behind ITC all the way up past the rotunda, all the way to the Hilton Hotel. And this, if you look at the total cost here, the total cost includes design and construction management. The construction projects that I don't have funded yet, that we have the designs that are just about ready to go, and our next in line would be the Route 10A and Tijan Parkway. Route 10A is the one from Home Depot all the way up to the through the airport, and then of course Tijan Parkway. We're gonna fix the intersection, widen both those roads, and the reason for that is we're trying to take traffic off of Marine Drive, going north and southbound in the mornings and evenings. And then of course Route 17. Route 17 is the Cross Island Road. They started that many years ago, and I think they just did about 1/3 of it. And so we're going to finish that up and take it from Windward Hills area all the way to and connect with Route 5. Next slide, please. Okay, let's just talk specifically about some of the road construction projects that we have. Next slide, please. One of them is going to be the Hudson Bridge temporary shoring. Hudson Bridge, as you can see here, hopefully you can see it. It's one of the bridges down south. It had some, it collapsed a little bit a couple years ago, so we've temporarily, we did a temporary fix. We're going to do something a little bit more long-term involving shoring. We actually put that out for bid for a complete replacement, and the bids that came in were way over budget. We tried it twice. We don't know whether, we're still talking to contractors about why the price is so high as opposed to the engineering estimate. So in the meantime, we're going to shore it and at least get it to last another 10, if not 15 years until we can find the right funding to replace it. Next slide. Safety improvements on Route 10. I think I just talked a little bit about that, and that'll involve traffic signals and pavement as well. This one here, this is the underpavement infrastructure retrofit. This is going to be Guam's largest road construction, probably in history. This is being done because of a big part because of the military buildup. This is going to, the area is from Naval Station all the way up to Camp Blas. And the reason for that, in our discussions, in the meetings that we've seen from DOD, is they plan to utilize a number of vehicles, transport vehicles to transport supplies, I imagine munitions and equipment and things of that nature that are overweight and won't stand up to the condition of Guam's current roads and bridges. So the DOD is funding this project. It'll include the retrofit and reconstruction of both outer lanes, northbound and southbound on Marine Drive, again from Naval Station all the way up to Camp Blas. The outer lanes will be reconstructed as needed, and then also 5 bridges will be replaced and reconstructed. Those 5 bridges, next slide, that shows us the different areas of the different 5 bridges. The first one is going to be the Fonte Bridge in Adelup. This is right in front of the cemetery in the Adelup area. So that's a 6-7 lane bridge, and that'll be totally replaced. The next bridge is going to be the Atantano Bridge. This is right outside Naval Station in the Santa Rita area. We're going to replace Asen Bridge in Asen. The Laguas Bridge in Pidi, and the Sasa Bridge, another bridge in Pidi. The one I'm trying to get, or I'm not going to try, we have to get it included, is going to be, I believe it's called the Agata Bridge, and that is right in front of the Polaris Point traffic light, where we have the annual, if not the biannual or triannual or quadannual flooding there. That bridge has been rated, the rating on the bridge is fine for the heavy loads, but the problem we have there is the flooding. It's got small box culverts, and it's just not enough to take the water from the mountains out to the ocean, especially when it's high tide. So we have to get that bridge included in this retrofit from Naval Station all the way to Camp Blas. Now, lastly, as I end my presentation, just want to talk a little bit about the Village Street projects. This is locally funded, and I thank the legislature, the speaker. Last year, typically in the last 5 fiscal years, we typically get about $2 million, a little over $2 million for Village Streets. Last year, not only did they give us appropriated $2 million, they also appropriated $10 million, and we went to town spending. So the last 2.5 years of construction for Village Streets, you can see the information there. We've spent quite a bit of money, and we will continue to spend the money as long as we get the appropriations. How we do this is we go through every village, there's a rating sheet that we do for all the different roads. We work with the mayors. Contrary, some mayors say we don't talk to them, we talk to all of them. And it's a good work in progress. It's kind of like a 50-50 work schedule that we do. Public Works does the base work, and the contractor comes in and does the milling and the paving. And in the end, we come up with a nice, wonderful, smooth road. The only thing about smooth roads that we're going to get into is once you get the roads nice and smooth is you're going to get the speed up. And that's where my good friends over at GPD are out there trying to control the traffic, but it's inevitable. Once you get smooth roads, you're going to get higher speeds, and so we have to be careful about that as well. That's all I have. I only have 15 minutes. If there's any questions, I think the guys from GPA and Waterworks can take the questions. Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Make sure everyone has power, right? Thank you, Bureau Stats and Plans, Governor, Speaker, for having us and inviting us to this important event. I'm Antonio Gumatato with Guam Power Authority, and I'm presenting on GPA's land and inventory. So there's 3 questions that was on the invite, and we'll address the current land inventory for GPA, the status of land transfers from the United States Navy, and the future plans for power development. So a little bit about GPA. We have 1,821 miles of transmission and distribution lines. We have about 29 electrical substations, 64 feeders, 11 plus, or 11, and there's an asterisk there for more additional generation plants. About 36,000 poles. So it's a lot of stuff that we cover, about 156 square mile service territory. So it's a lot of the land that we do need. Next slide. So currently in GovGuam's inventory, we have 26 sites. Some of them are generation plant and substation sites. One we use for vehicle maintenance, and one for an administration building. And earlier, Mr. Borja, Director Borja mentioned, asked about who owns the land, right? And we at GPA believe that we are just stewards of the land, right? So you'll see in some of the documents here that most of the properties that we do, that we're stewards of, there's conditions to those deeds, right? So it's really the people's land. Next slide. So here's a typical layout of one of the properties that we own or we are stewards of. Is the Didido T&D site. So behind Prestige Auto up in Didido, we have our T&D substation or T&D operation center on the left beyond that cul-de-sac. We also have a supply and warehouse. We have a combustion turbine and a substation. So all 3 parcels are there, and if you look, it's pretty maxed out. We are saturated in that area. And I don't know if you see that little dash G up there. It appears that GPA is encroaching on some rights of ways. All right, so this is our crown jewel. This is GPA's Fadian property. Earlier, Mr. Director Borja talked about Public Law 22-18. So 22-18 is the law that reserved the property. Public Law 31-77, thank you, the legislature, for granting that to GPA as a steward. So again, it was tough because we had to prove the conditions, right? That we had to develop a site plan. We had to develop a funding source for that. So we had to go through all these metrics to be able to acquire the property. So it is 15 acres. As you can see, we're right back here. We have a cliff. So it was not suitable for development. However, we made it suitable. There was 3 CHamoru Land Trust occupants on the property. We had to relocate them. And we worked with all the agencies to do that. We paid for a bunch of things, right? We had to build them a house. We had to, and all these conditions came from the government agency. We had to pay for agriculture trees, right? So it was tough, but we did it, right? So it is a consolidated GPA and GWA office. It is 116,000 square feet, LEED silver, houses about 364 employees. And there's room for future development in the front. So going on to the, so GPA also has private acquisitions, right? So we acquired property through different means, not just government property, right? So we have about 6 sites. There's 4 substations. Leo Palace, as a condition of their development of the big hotel, they had to provide a power source, right? And over time, we were able to prove to them that we can provide that power source, right? So they provided a electrical substation and a power plant. We also have one in Tenjo area, and then the photovoltaic sites in Dandan and Manila provide us a substation. But we're happy to announce that in July 2022, we acquired those 2 sites in Leo Palace, fee simple to GPA. This is the Ukadu site up in Harmon, across the mall area. So in 2016, 2017 timeframe, we were looking for sites to build our new power plant, right? And we also looked at GA, Guam Ancestral Lands Commission at that time. And the idea was to work with Guam Waterworks, the northern water treatment plant, to utilize the gray water from there for cooling, right? And then additionally, there's the load center, majority of the homes and businesses are up north. So if we push everything up north, it's closer to the load center and away from the PD risk areas with seawater and stuff like that. And in 2018, we acquired this from private landowners at fair market value. That's all I can say. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to the land acquisition from the Navy. So it's the Navy GPA island-wide power system transfer. So back in the 1970s, we did this powerful agreement where we proved that we acquired all the GPA assets, or Navy assets, Navy power assets, and we proved to them over time that we could be a viable company to provide power source to the military installations. And it was authorized U.S. Public Law 100-202 to acquire all the power plants, all the electrical assets, and all of their substations. So approximately 37 acres is what we're going to acquire. Here's an illustration of all of the power transmission lines throughout the island that were built by the Navy, and that will be part of the conveyance, right? So we will acquire the easements, and the good thing about this is that we will acquire the assets, which is the power poles, the big octagonal stuff that you see out there, the power lines, and the easements that are associated with that. And we're happy to announce that in 2021, the first transfer was completed with the APRA substation in San Jose. Next on the list is the Agano power plant. So moving on to the future of land development for future plans for GPA, it's driven by our master plan.
Did you know that GPA has a master plan for Guam's future to help lower your power bill?
Integrated Resource Plan is a 20-year clean energy master plan that increases renewables within Guam's energy grid over a period of time and paves the way to lower costs for you because of 50% renewable energy by 2035 and 100% by 2045. The master plan was created so that as GPA builds more renewable energy resources, older power generators that burn oil and gas will be replaced. Critical to GPA's clean energy plan is the new Ukudu power plant. Not only will Ukudu burn cleaner and greener fuel, it will also allow the older Cabarrus power plants to retire. The Ukudu project also includes clean energy backup generators. This is vital to Guam's energy security and ensures the lights stay on even in an emergency. GPA's Clean Energy Master Plan means lower power bills, cleaner air quality, and safe, reliable power for all of us at all times. Learn about GPA's Clean Energy Master Plan and Guam's path to 100% clean energy at guampowerauthority.com. Guam Power Authority. Power to serve.
The dates of 2035 and 2045 are not GPA's dates, those are RBF dates. GPA's targets for 50% and 100% are 2030 and 2045 years.
Thank you, John. So phase 4, there's a IFB out, GPA 012-23. It's between 180 megawatts to 342 megawatts. We're looking at 40% renewable energy goal or target. So some of the innovations include that. And this is a drone photo of the Dandan site in Iran. So here, so part of the IFB and the old ones, the Manila and the Dandan, to include the new ones, there's 2 pieces of things that we write into the technical document that call for the interconnection. So they are required to provide a new substation as a renewable facility to an existing transmission line. Additionally, they have to do all the easement acquisitions. So there's actually a public law that prevents us, GPA, from using our eminent domain rights to go out and acquire property for solar sites or renewables. So this is a picture of our Dandan facility. So they built that and they conveyed it to GPA. So all the panels out there is not us. That's a contractor. This is where they bring the power in and transmit it to ours for interconnection. Like that way. And this is our Manila substation.
That and any transmission lines they go to interconnect each other.
So here's a Dandan site. Just to give you the magnitudes on the left. So this is the Dandan site. It produces 25.65 megawatts on 157 acres. And then Manila site, there are the numbers. So it's a lot of land and mass. And if you see that little itty bitty substation, that's the GPA footprint. Everything else is solar farm. Pending any questions, that concludes my brief.
So is the solar happening for the one still?
So I'm Antonio Gumatato, GPA, GIS, and real property. I brought 2 really smart guys with me. Vince Sablan, our manager of engineering, and John Cruz, our assistant GM for engineering and technical services.
For the solar capping of the landfill, we have a MOU. We have an MOU with Urban Site in the Guam Solid Waste Authority that on cap landfills, that we would be able to use those cap landfills to provide opportunities to put solar on them. There's about a 4-something megawatt capability with Lejeune 1 and 2 cells. And from the ordered dump, if they cap that, that would be over a 10 megawatt capability. So that's something that we are going to try to Under our virtual power plant program, that's one of the things that we outline as a means of achieving at least 20 megawatts on both rooftops and ground-mounted land systems.
So do you have an idea of what your land inventory requirement is going to be in order to meet the renewable goals of 100%? And what's the kind of planning involvement to look at the landscape and maybe, what's your initial thoughts on compatible uses? So land inventory for the future.
So your two questions are compatible uses for land that has renewable energy on it.
What's your need for land in the future to meet your 100% renewables? So how much more land are you going to need in order to put panels in?
I had that number, I don't have it on top of my head, but there's sufficient land on island to do that. It's probably on the order of 2,000 or 3,000 acres. We are having a couple of studies with Sandia National Labs, NREL, and the Hawaiian Natural Energy Institute over the next couple of years. And those studies are an extension of our Clean Energy Master Plan, because I need to retire and I can't be writing 1,000-page copies. Okay, but they will look at what would be an optimum mix between new land, rooftop solar, and land such as the solid waste facilities. And it would be done in a stakeholder fashion, in an open, transparent manner. Most of our studies use stakeholder groups. When we did our Clean Energy Master Plan, it was a two-year effort, and we invited a whole slice of the community from the DOD stakeholders, Chamber of Commerce, the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association, UOG, Red Cross, Mayor's Council of Guam, right? So this two-year effort will be a chance that everybody can at least provide some feedback as to how we're going to seriously put the pedal to the metal tops on. If you have any questions, I'll give you my card or I'll give you my email, and then I'll take a link to answer.
Thanks.
I've got one behind me over here. All right.
Actually, it's not really a question, it's more of a statement, in the fact that when Guam gets ready to take over the easements, as far as historic preservation, we want the military, the Navy and all that owns those to put in a preservation clause that they pay for the archaeology that's being done. You have to realize in the easement between Route 4 and Route 8, we got over 200 remains out there just on the sewer line alone. As you go down Route 1 towards, City Bank, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of individuals. The memorial that Mr. Ariola talked about at Aganya, that is because we only got like 68 people out of the roadway because we stopped them from going down 6 foot deep. If not, we were talking about 700 to 800 individuals. So when you ride down Route 1, anywhere you're going, say your prayers, you're riding over the thing. So before we get those easements back, they want to give them back. They want to give them back right now. Hey, you got your land back. But you also got the cost of millions and millions of dollars in archaeology and everything else, especially if we go underground with the power, or if we have to dig up the roads and redo them. It's going to be millions and millions of dollars, and that's why I just want to say, make sure that preservation clause is in there, that they pay for that archaeology, and it's set up to do that.
Yes, so for the Apra Heights substation transfer, we had to go through the Lieutenant Governor's clearinghouse, which is it's another bite at the apple for Guam to look at it, and we could not get that until that was recorded. Sir?
JR, one of those slides you had the Okodu power plant appearing, and then the cameras plant disappearing. And in it, when it disappeared, it looked like you guys were setting up maybe a marina or something down there. So are the plants still on to, I don't like to use the word abandoned, but is the plant still online somewhere to abandon the GPA operation down there in PD?
So the condition of the deed from the United States Navy or military was that as long as it's being used for power facilities, right, that we can keep the property. So what we're trying to do is utilize it, scrap it, utilize it for something related to the power generation on Guam. Also, there's a cooling channel. There's a bunch of other stuff that we want to get from the Navy, right? That's inclusive of all of that. So yes, so it will be related to some type of power industry.
So we're not gonna get the land, accept land from the Navy unless they do the due diligence with the environment.
That's correct, yes, yes, absolutely.
That's one thing that we need to.
Yes.
And then the other question that I have there is when you guys connected to land bank, you have to get some property for a substation and telephone pole? Like the fire station?
Yes, sir.
And that property came from the land trust?
That's correct,
But
yes,
you have
sir.
to get that through legislation, right?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so due to time, we all want to be on schedule. We're going to have Guam Water Works.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think it's still good afternoon or good morning, half a day. I know it's lunchtime, so I'm going to gauge the interest between a hungry, growling stomach and the smell of great food. So just cue me, hand signals, I'm watching. So first of all, before I start, on behalf of our General Manager, Mr. Berdalio, I'd like to kind of remind you of our mission statement of us providing outstanding customer service by delivering excellent water and wastewater services in a safe, reliable, responsible, and cost-effective manner. Next slide. So before I begin, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jeanette Babauta Owens. I am new. I'm new to GWA. I'm literally 15 days old, working days old. I grew up in Guam, a proud alumni of our Guam public school system. From kindergarten and elementary school to PD Middle School to Ocean Views High School. And I have to admit, as soon as I graduated, I did leave. I worked in Los Angeles for over 31 years, and I want to bring back that knowledge that we have here. And I was proud to be a part of Mr. Berdalio's team. So I'm 15 days old here. I'm drinking from a fire hose and learning from every one of you in this room. So I'm thankful that I have the opportunity to learn from you and come back to really appreciate. And one thing I do share with you is the love of our island of Guam. With me are my team here. We have Brian Hess, Senior Engineer in New Area Development and Permits. So he's the one who wants any GIS regarding our water meters and wastewater meters. It will be Brian. So I know that we mentioned that earlier, just wanted to let you know. And then our land agent here, Bobby Cruz, some of you already know her. So the next slide. So one of the three primary key objectives that our general manager wanted to share with you today, as you begin to deliberate the future land use planning for our island of Guam, is really to preserve our existing GWA land inventories. I'll go into a little bit more detail if time permits and hungry stomachs quell and give me patience, a little patience, preserve current and existing priority use, as well as identify our future needs. Next slide. So this, before we begin to plan forward, we want to learn or apply the lessons learned we had from the past. And so the first objective that we want to impart with you today is to preserve our existing GWA land inventories. In June 1993, with Public Law 2218, it was enacted to reserve property for public utilities agents of Guam. And in July of 1997, our grant deed and assignment laws were enacted to grant and assign certain properties to GWA. And in November 16, 2007, GWA entered into a contract so that we can begin to survey the lands, and then a confirmation deed was completed and officially filed under GWA. We are still currently assessing surveying the land, and we're now at 75% complete today. Next slide. As part of our preserving our existing land inventories, throughout the years, and some of you earlier this morning mentioned some of the challenges, we wanted to kind of share with you some of the challenges we're currently facing today, as well as share that with you. One of them is property ownership under private, federal, or government agencies. Some of the departments already mentioned that. Two is private property and government capital infrastructure projects that encroaches on private properties, and that is universal, not just island of Guam, but that also happens also in the States. Legal descriptions stated incorrectly on grant deed, another universal issue. Land registration matters under the Government of Guam process. Our future growth and expansions leading to more footprint requirements, such as in order to deliver excellent water and wastewater services, which is a vital component of any land. You cannot, if your land will hold any value, you have to have access to water and wastewater. So that requires, we need additional storage capacity, expansion of existing booster pump stations, and of course, our wells for drilling our supplies. And then our CHamoru Land Trust properties with structures adjacent to our GWA facilities that we're currently working very closely with them to address. And let me end on our first objective is really about collaborations and assistance from each one of you today. The think tank of our land use planning and private developers on ensuring utilities exist within the proper right-of-way or easement reservation. And we named a couple of items that we're still currently working with you today, our Barragata Reservoir, our Barragata Heights Reservoir, Umatic, Maritza and Waste Treatment Plant. The second objective, next slide, is to, and I know Guam EPA is here, is to really kind of remind you of our Water Resources Conservation Act to preserve our current and existing priority use for water resources development and government lands, which provides for the conservation, preservation, and protection of Guam's groundwater resources and regulates the use of Guam's groundwater resources for the full beneficial use in the interests of the people of Guam and the general public welfare. Next slide. Our third objective is to identify the future needs of Guam's water resources, which is one of the key items the governor mentioned that is challenging and stressed. One, to help us by addressing the stresses, really prioritize lands for water resource development based on hydrological data. Well, I'll mention this in 3 ways in the next slides. 2 is to reserve lands for additional GWA facilities for future development. 3 is reserve easements of existing infrastructure in any return of federal access lands. Current need for land for centralized water treatment facilities for emerging contaminants, and prioritize lands for relocation of existing GWA facilities, Some of you have some grand master plans that you would like to move forward with, and those are things that we need you to take to help us help you. So next slide. There we go. Prioritize lands for water resource development based on hydrological data. So you all know about Northern Lens Aquifer. So this is a good picture. Most of these pictures are all very familiar to you. It's about placing future wells where hydrological data indicates we can obtain the best production with the least adverse impact to the aquifers. As you begin your planning, it's always the highest and best use of the land. Second, avoid the saltwater intrusion and minimize any impact of emerging contaminants. Next slide. Placing future wells where hydrological data indicates we can obtain the best production with least adverse impact really shows you a good cross-section. This is some graphics that are very familiar to you about taking our cross-section. If we can place some future developments along where our most productive waterlands are, it really brings value to the land and the development we are building together. Next slide. Avoid saltwater intrusion. This is largely due to our 120 wells that GWA has. Excessive pumping of fresh groundwater initiates advances of saltwater freshwater interface inward due to hydraulic equilibrium and continuity. This introduces a saltwater intrusion into coastal aquifers. So this is very key. We wanted to kind of remind you of that when we are not coordinated as we begin to pump water from our wells, and the drawdown effect of that when you're pumping excessively. So it needs to be coordinated and it needs to be managed. Next slide. Now this is fairly new, and Guam EPA here, Commander Bird is here. It's really about our polyfluoroalkyl substances. Which does that mean? It's about the synthetic compounds that exist in any of our large consumer product applications, especially non-stick cookware, which is prevalent in every grocery and economic activity that we have today, as well as any other like firefighting foams. I thought that would be something of interest. And I took more of a chemical compound, because every time you mention PFAS, people look and say, what is that? So the presence of PFAS compounds is one of the EPA's primary concern today, as well as Guam EPA, in the source of water and drinking water. And it's increasing due to their widespread use and environmental persistence. Next slide. So of course we want to look into the current needs of building centralized treatment facilities of emerging contaminants. So what does that mean? That also means that we are going to, as we mentioned, deliver water and wastewater in a cost-effective manner. It means to really be efficient with the lands that we currently have here at GWA. But in some cases, it may require additional lands. It just really depends on the type of treatment that's needed. So EPA, for example, has mentioned 3 different types of treatments. I only showed you 2, which is a membrane filtration treatment of PFAS. So, and the other one is the ionized. I'm sorry, that was a typo. It was supposed to be ionized. But those type of treatments are similar to our treatment plants. We are looking into seeing if we can build these treatments within our existing facilities, but more than likely, because our water supplies are so spread out, we may need additional land to do so. And we'll continue to study it to maximize whatever we do need. But we wanted to let you know the challenges and wanting to share that with you. Next slide. As you know, we are building out our district court order, And so there are needs for more water reservoirs, booster pump stations, and sewage pump stations. As you begin to deliberate, as you continue to deliberate the land use planning of the island, please know that you need these water resources in order for it to really build the economic development that we all desire. And then next slide. Lastly, I'll end on these two last ones, which is our current land needed for relocation of existing GWA facilities. We are aware of the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority Master Plan that calls for the relocation of the Hagåtña wastewater treatment plant. So those are things that we'd like to work with you and collaborate on where we can relocate it so you can build the vision of what you would like at the Hagåtña Basin area. And lastly, of course, we touched on this several times throughout this morning, is to preserve the easements of existing infrastructure in any return of federal excess lands. So again, the lessons learned from the past, we want to make sure that we bring that forward. So avoid any repeat of the Base Realignment and Closure Act property that returns with no provision for existing utilities or access to support the use of or redevelopment of these properties. So how did I do for time?
Very well. Very well.
Thank you. So this ends my presentation. I'm here to address any questions that you may have.
You meant on that slide that you had there at 75% completion, and maybe this goes to Bobby.
Is that the list of lots that were transferred to GWA where they were supposed to cut out their facilities and then return those properties to the CHamoru Land Trust?
No, that was this is phase 2, 75% complete. Phase 2 project. We still have phase 3 that we're gonna go into.
And that's that 211
That's
lot?
correct.
Thank you.
Excellent. So you had pity on me that I have 15 working days. So I thank you.